Hello and welcome to our webinar. The webinar itself is all about Unit 2 of the BTEC Teamwork and Personal Development in the Community qualification, and it will take about 10 to 15 minutes of your time. Unit 2 is all about giving you an understanding of the employment skills in the uniformed and wider organisations. This unit will provide the theory that you may need if you are looking into career options within the uniformed organisations. A point to note is that this unit is worth 5 credits. If you choose to study this unit, you will have to complete Unit 3, which is also worth 5 credits, to make up a multiple of 10 credits. The webinar has 2 key objectives. Primarily, the purpose of the webinar is for me to guide you through Unit 2 and the 4 written tasks within the workbook, step by step. And secondly, I will provide contact details for the 3 area managers. They will be able to put you in contact with the regional manager who looks after your cadet unit should you have any queries after this webinar has finished. For this session, you will need a copy of Workbook 2 and the learning guide to support Workbook 2. You may have those as either a paper copy or as an electronic copy. Just to give you a quick overview, so you know what to expect from this webinar, there are 4 written tasks in the workbook. They will cover the main roles and responsibilities of different uniformed organisations, the different employment opportunities available, and the conditions of service. This webinar will guide you through those tasks step by step, and you can pause the webinar to give you time to complete the task in your workbook. One final point from me before we get started is to point out that on each task slide, there will be a green circle prompt in the right-hand corner of the screen. This will contain links to the relevant pages in the learning guide that will help you with your research. Task 1 is asking you to outline the main purpose of contrasting related organisations. You can find the task on page 4 of the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 8 to 13. For this task, it is key to understand the word purpose. In this context, purpose being the main reason why an organisation exists. Put another way, it is an outline description of what the organisation does or is expected to do. This is often known as a mission statement or an organisational description. You are asked to look into 2 uniformed organisations, one military, in this case the Royal Navy, and one non-military, the Fire and Rescue Service. Once you've undertaken the required research in your learning guide, the answers can be detailed in the workbook in the spaces provided. Press pause now so that you can complete this task in your workbook. Once you've completed the workbook as required, task 1 will be complete. The learner guide provides detail that you may find useful for this task. If you use any information from the learner guide or any other published source, then you must remember to use quotation marks and note where that information has come from. Moving on to task 2. Now that you understand the purpose of 2 organisations, the Royal Navy and the Fire and Rescue Service, we will look at them in a little further detail and look at their responsibilities. You can find the task on pages 5 and 6 of the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 14 to 16. You will need to understand the keyword responsibility, meaning the things that an organisation is responsible for to achieve their purpose. The responsibilities of an organisation may be very extensive and varied and show how adaptable uniformed organisations need to be. You will need to look at the Royal Navy as a military organisation and detail what they do and what they are responsible for. The learning guide provides some additional information, for example, detailing how the Royal Navy contribute to the security of the United Kingdom and participate in peace support and humanitarian operations. Once you've undertaken the required research in your learning guide, the 3 answers that are required can be detailed in the workbook in the spaces provided. You will also need to consider who this organisation is responsible to. Is it the national government or the local government? Press pause now so that you can complete this part of the task. You will also need to look at the responsibilities of the Fire and Rescue Service as a non-military organisation, what they do and what they are responsible for. Again, the learning guide provides a little detail in what they do. They give advice on how to prevent fires and restrict their spread, and protect life in the event of a fire. Once you have undertaken the required research in your learning guide, there is space in the workbook for you to detail your 3 answers. As you did with the Royal Navy, you need to consider who this organisation is responsible to. Is it the national government or the local government? Press pause now so that you can complete this part of the task in your workbook. Once you've completed detail for both the Royal Navy and the Fire and Rescue Service, Task 2 will be complete. As with the first task, the learner guide and any other published resources that you use, you must remember to use quotation marks and note where the information has come from. Moving on to Task 3 now, we will be looking at the different employment opportunities available in contrasting uniformed organisations. You can find the task itself on pages 6 and 7 in the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 17 to 19. The first organisation that we will be looking at is the Army and the job of an Army soldier. If you had to explain the job description of an Army soldier, what would you say? Your task is to write a brief job description, so looking at the different elements of their job will help. The learning guide provides some information that will help, including how a soldier can be involved in peacekeeping, disaster relief, and full-scale war as and when required. Press pause now so that you can complete this part of the task in your workbook. The second half of this task looks at the ambulance service and the job description of a paramedic. Again, the learning guide provides useful detail in that paramedics can attend medical emergencies, provide aid, and provide hospital transport in non-emergency situations. Press pause now so that you can complete this second part of the task in your workbook. Once you've completed the job description of both an Army soldier and a paramedic, then Task 3 will be complete. Task 4 gives you the chance to describe the current conditions of service for 2 contrasting uniformed organisations. For those wanting to follow in the workbook, the task details can be found on pages 8 and 9 and in the learning guide on pages 20 to 23. Each service will have its own conditions of service, so its own set of benefits that will apply to their staff members. These benefits will be the incentives to encourage members to remain as part of that organisation and can include pay, pension, leave, medical care, or allowances, to name a few points. The task asks you to consider the conditions of service for 2 services and to describe what you consider to be the most important. The first service being the RAF, serving as an airman or an airwoman, and the second service being the police service as a police officer. Press pause now so that you can complete the task in your workbook. There is plenty of space for you to detail and then describe 5 conditions of service for each service. Once you've completed the tables as required, then task 4 will be complete. And finally, once you've completed the 4 tasks, your workbook will be ready to be submitted for marking. 2 final points from me regarding the workbook would be, firstly, to double check your work and ensure that you have answered each question in full before it is submitted. And secondly, to ensure that you complete the front page of the workbook in full, including your name, email address, CVQO reference number, and cadet unit, and that you sign and date the learner declaration. Having this information completed is key, as it will help us to process your workbook as quickly as possible once we receive it. If you are using an electronic workbook and will upload it to Moodle, the front cover may look slightly different, but the key elements on the front page must still be completed. If you find you have any additional questions following this webinar, then please don't worry. There are a number of regional managers that cover the country and your unit specifically. On the map here are the email addresses of Steve, Andy, and Richard. They will be able to put you in contact with your own regional manager, who will be able to help you with any queries you do have. I hope that this webinar has helped you a little more in understanding what is required for each task. Thank you for joining us, and good luck with completing Unit 2.